Somchai found the golden boy in a ramshackle, tin-roofed shrine, deep in the rural outskirts, miles from the nearest paved road. The air was heavy with humidity and the smell of rot and unidentifiable burnt offerings. The Ajarn who sold it was skeletal, his eyes sunken and cautious, watching the flickering candlelight more than Somchai. The old man performed a short, whispered ceremony, his voice a dry rustle. "He is Petch," the Ajarn rasped, indicating the small, gold-lacquered figure nestled in faded crimson silk. Petch, meaning diamond or jewel. The doll's small and blinking smile was unnervingly perfect, too smooth for wood. "He brings fortune. But fortune demands tribute. It is an exchange, a contract. Never, ever forget the tribute." Somchai, whose tiny hardware store was hemorrhaging money month after month, scoffed internally. His desperation had overridden his fear. He had paid a fortune just for the doll and the strange rituals, handing over every last reserve he possessed. He needed more than fortune. He needed a miracle strong enough to resurrect his entire life. He set Petch on a makeshift altar in his dusty back room, following the specific instructions. A glass of vibrant, artificially red strawberry soda, 3 perfectly boiled eggs, and a brand new, varnished wooden top, placed carefully by the doll's small feet. The next morning, the miracle arrived, not with a roar, but with a bizarre, swift gust of fate. A well-dressed city developer, who claimed he was just passing through and got a flat tire, walked in, cleared out his entire dwindling stock of rusty nails, plumbing joints, and outdated paint cans, and paid double the listed price in cash, without even haggling. The money felt hot and foreign in Somchai's hand. By the end of the week, Somchai had won a modest, yet life-altering sum in the local lottery. A number he had dreamt of. An utterly meaningless sequence he'd never play otherwise. The miracle was real. The tribute had been accepted. Within 6 months, Somchai was no longer struggling. His tiny shop was gone, replaced by a climate-controlled 2-story showroom of granite and glass. He drove a new black Mercedes, kept meticulously clean. Petch's altar grew into a monstrous Baroque cabinet, draped in silk and velvet. It was adorned not just with jasmine ropes, but with gold-plated iPhones, sealed boxes of rare Japanese snacks, and cases of imported sparkling cider. The air in the back room, now an exclusive, locked office, was permanently thick with the oppressive, cloying, sickly sweet scent of milk and candy. But the success had an agonizing cost. Petch was becoming possessive. It started subtly. Somchai missed his son's school play because he felt an overwhelming, paralyzing dread when he tried to leave the shop. This dread wasn't emotional. It was physical, a crushing weight on his chest that prevented him from lifting his foot over the threshold. The control was absolute. If he managed to slip away, his luck would stutter immediately. A major deal would fall through, or an entire shipment would be damaged in a bizarre accident. His sleep became a torture. He would wake religiously at 3 a.m. to the faint, soft sound of the wooden top spinning, sometimes not in the back room, but right next to his bed. He had to go check the altar. The ritual lasted 20 minutes every night. He had to examine the offerings, ensure Petch's velvet cushion was pristine, and remain perfectly silent until the sound of the spinning top ceased entirely. Somchai was chronically exhausted, his eyes perpetually rimmed red from lack of rest. The spirit was profoundly jealous. One evening, Somchai's wife, Lin, came into the sealed office, having found the key. She wrinkled her nose, disgusted. Why is the milk sour again? And why does he need 5 glasses? This room smells like a graveyard covered in sugar. She moved toward the altar to swap the rancid offerings. As Lynn reached out, Petch's lacquered face, usually fixed in a smooth, beatific smile, seemed to stretch, the mouth widening into a cold, infantile grimace. For a split second, the benign gold finish was replaced by the wet, gray color of ancient clay. Then, Lynn screamed. She staggered back, clutching her hand against her chest. A perfect, vivid red welt, the size and shape of a child's palm, was blooming across her skin, as if she'd been slapped hard by a small, impossibly strong hand. "Don't touch my things." A voice, high and thin as a plucked wire, yet utterly commanding, whispered from the direction of the doll. Lynn left that night, taking their son. She said she couldn't live in a house ruled by a golden ghost that could hurt her. Somchai didn't argue. He was already too far gone, too consumed by the panic of losing Petch's favor. He knew Petch had orchestrated it. The spirit had wanted them gone, removing the last distraction. The offerings escalated again. Petch no longer desired silence. He demanded Somchai sit with him, perfectly still, for 6 hours every workday, an agonizing, lonely vigil where the fortune poured in. But sanity slowly ebbed out. 1 year after Somchai bought his golden boy, he was richer than he could have ever dreamed. But his empire felt like a cage padded with silk and gold. He was gaunt, terrified, and utterly alone, trapped in the cloying perfume of success and fear. Somchai's empire was complete, and his misery was absolute. The wealth was a gilded cage, its bars forged from his own fear. He lived in terror of the 3 a.m. wake-up calls, the souring milk, and the cold, invisible rage of the spirit. He hadn't slept properly in months, his body running on adrenaline and the faint, sweet exhaust fumes of Petch's unending tributes. One afternoon, while sitting in his silent, over-scented office, he looked at Petch, dazzling on his Baroque cabinet, and realized the truth. He would rather be broke, despised, and fighting for survival than live 1 more hour as the Golden Boy's servant. His attempt at rebellion was conducted in terrified secrecy. Over 3 sleepless nights, he used a burner phone to scour cryptic online forums and old religious texts, looking not for guidance, but for a foolproof ritual of disposal. He settled on the ancient method of the unbound dead. He acquired specific white burial shrouds, consecrated with holy ash he bought from a distant, skeptical temple. At midnight, when Petch was typically silent, Somchai crept into the office. The air was colder than ice. With shaking hands, he wrapped the tiny, cold figure, binding it tightly in linen rope, so it could never move or speak again, its unnervingly perfect smile hidden beneath layer after layer of white cloth. The final betrayal was driving the Golden Boy to its end in the black Mercedes, a vehicle Petch's fortune had paid for. Somchai drove to a remote, polluted stretch of the river, where the water was black and smelled of industrial waste, a place far from any sacred ground. He stood on the muddy bank, the heavy bundle warm in his hands, feeling like a father burying a terrible, monstrous child. He whispered a frantic apology to Lynn and his son, then hurled the Kumanthong far out into the murky water. The bundle hit the surface with a heavy, sickening splash, disappearing immediately into the black current. Somchai didn't wait. He drove home feeling a momentary, overwhelming lightness, the first true breath of relief he'd had in a year. He slept for 12 uninterrupted hours, waking to the ordinary sounds of the city, the sun streaming through his window. The sweet, cloying smell was gone. He showered, put on fresh clothes, and actually smiled. He walked downstairs, savoring the normalcy. He poured himself a cup of coffee and approached the front of his showroom, feeling free. He knew the money would stop, the business would fail, but he had his sanity back. Then the bell above the shop door jingled. Somchai froze. He hadn't unlocked the doors yet. He looked toward the counter. A splash of brilliant, impossible gold caught his eye. Petch was sitting right there, atop the silent cash register. The golden doll was utterly, bafflingly dry. Not a drop of river water marred its flawless lacquer, but its presence had brought the stink back with a vengeance. The showroom was instantaneously drenched in the cloying scent of spoiled milk, incense, and artificial strawberry. Petch was smiling, but the gold of his eyes was colder than river silt, filled with an ancient, predatory intelligence. He seemed to have grown in stature. "Papa," the thin, high voice echoed in the cavernous space. "You threw away my toys. You threw away my house. Did you truly think you could escape the contract?" Next to the golden figure, where the price tag should have been, was a small, torn piece of notebook paper. On it was a crude drawing, a stick figure wearing a dress, Lynn, and a smaller stick figure holding her hand, his son. The entire drawing, particularly Lynn's face, was violently scribbled through with a thick, dark red crayon that seemed to pulse faintly. The spirit's whisper, sharp and final, cut through the oppressive silence. It was no longer an infant's plea, but a demon's decree. "You forgot the tribute. You are still my papa, and you must make it up to me now. My playmate is waiting." The terror of the spirit's return was absolute. Petch, no longer content with the back office, now presided over the empire from Somchai's mahogany desk in the main showroom, casually surrounded by stacks of 100 baht notes. It was a display of utter ownership. That evening, Somchai locked himself in his bedroom, bolting the heavy oak door. He was desperate for even a minute of quiet sleep. But Petch had found a new game, the psychological siege. The sounds began immediately. Not the rattle of wood, but the soft, mechanical whirring of the wooden top, impossibly close, just outside his door. The sound would shift, sometimes seeming to be inside the walls, sometimes directly beneath his bed. Then, the rhythmic thump, thump, thump began, the sound of a child's small, bare feet, jumping softly but insistently on the hall tile. Every third thump, the sound was punctuated by a thin, high-pitched giggle that seemed to scrape against Somchai's spine. He tried cotton in his ears, then a pillow over his head, but the sound was internal, reverberating in his skull. The suffocating sweetness of candy and spoiled milk was now the air he breathed, coating his throat. Finally, in the depth of the night, the jumping stopped. A small, perfect shadow slid beneath the door, shaped like Petch, and rested there until dawn. Somchai didn't sleep at all. He spent the entire night huddled beneath his sheets, teeth chattering, listening to the golden boy play him into exhaustion. When Somchai stumbled into the showroom, his employees, 2 young men he had hired and paid handsomely, were gathered in the loading bay, whispering nervously. Somchai's face, gray with sleeplessness, only intensified their fear. "Kun Somchai," the foreman stammered. The equipment is broken. The main hydraulic lift is frozen. We can't open the bay. And the air was the executioner. The smell was no longer just cloying. It was an aggressive, bile-inducing chemical cloud. Customers walked in and immediately walked out, covering their mouths. The very fabric of the business was fraying. The computer systems crashed every time Somchai tried to access the bank accounts. Every third invoice printed from the main server bore not product descriptions, but a crude, repetitive drawing of the Kumanthong's perfect, unnerving smile. As Somchai tried to reassure the foreman, Pech spoke, not to Somchai, but to the room. The golden boy, perched on the cash register, was a silent gold sentinel, but the air around him hummed with malicious intent. "You are slow," the high, thin voice rasped, directed at the employee trying to fix the lift. "You are lazy. Papa needs better helpers." The employee let out a weak cry, dropped his wrench, and bolted. His colleague followed instantly, leaving their substantial wages scattered on the counter. By noon, the business was entirely abandoned. Somchai was alone in his vast, silent, stinking showroom. Pech had effectively severed his connections to the outside world, ensuring the only voice Somchai heard was his own breaking mind and the spirit's insistent, playful demands. That evening, as darkness fell, every glass surface in the house cracked. Not shattered, but cracked perfectly across its middle, leaving a golden, splintered spiderweb where Somchai's distorted reflection should have been. The largest crack ran directly through the face of Lin in the framed wedding photo on his bedroom dresser. Hunger and total sleep deprivation had reduced Somchai to a skeletal, shaking wreck. His wealth meant nothing. He couldn't even manage to find the energy to boil an egg. He wandered the house, whispering desperate apologies to the golden figure, piling every piece of gold jewelry and every wad of cash he owned onto the altar, desperate for reprieve. The air, previously cloying and sweet, underwent a final chilling transformation. The candy and milk smells receded, replaced by a metallic, coppery scent. The sharp, unmistakable smell of fresh blood. It was subtle, yet pervasive, like a wound that wouldn't close. As he stared pleadingly at the doll, the small, crudely drawn picture of Lin and his son moved. The red crayon lines covering Lin's face began to smear and drip, thickening as if they were fresh pigment. The paper itself seemed to weep red. The simple stick figure of his son, standing beside her, was now circled with the same menacing, vibrant, wet red. A new whisper filled the room, cold and utterly devoid of childhood innocence. It no longer emanated from the doll, but from the air itself, surrounding Somchai like a tightening noose. "The offering I require is not gold, Papa. Gold is common. Lin took my playmate. Bring him back. The tribute is flesh and spirit. He must play with me forever, or everything. Your wealth, your life, the ground you stand on, will become dust, just like your ugly wife's picture." Somchai collapsed to his knees, his mind utterly shattered. The true, terrifying nature of the tribute was revealed. Not wealth, but a living soul, sacrificed to fuel the child's eternal game. He had traded his family for money, and now the golden boy was collecting the debt, transforming him from a willing owner into a broken, compliant agent of damnation. Somchai rose slowly, not as a man, but as an automaton powered by a singular, cold imperative. The primal panic was gone. replaced by a terrifying, hollow calm. He no longer smelled the rancid milk or the metallic air. He only felt the overwhelming, guiding force of the Kumanthong's power. His will was Petch's will. The millionaire, the father, the man who once fought for his survival, was a ghost in his own body, merely the vessel for the spirit's final need. He walked to the garage, his movements unnaturally smooth and precise, and got into his new black sedan, the car purchased with the first major wave of Petch's fortune, now a hearse of luxury. As he settled into the driver's seat, the car filled with the sweetest, most cloying perfume imaginable, a scent of triumph and absolute possession. The passenger seat remained empty, but the wooden top, the tiny, innocent toy Petch had received on the first day, was sitting perfectly still on the dashboard, glinting in the pale streetlights. It was a silent, golden compass guiding him. The drive was a journey into darkness, both literal and spiritual. The city lights blurred into streaks of fear, but Somchai's eyes remained fixed, dead. The spirit was a cold, insistent presence, a passenger in his mind. Every turn, every change of lane, every acceleration was an instruction whispered on the wind that somehow slipped past the sealed windows. "You know the way, Papa,"